Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Hello, everyone. Welcome in. And have you noticed lately how difficult it is to just get through life, get through work, get to the grocery store, and everyone seems angry? Get back in your car and suddenly there's just road rage and people doing whatever they want. And if you're like me, you're feeling that frustration on a daily basis. And that is really the focal point of the show today. Is it shouldn't hurt to go to work. We spend an awful lot of time in the workplace, over 40 hours, and sometimes even at home at night thinking about our work, extending that period of time from 40 hours and beyond. So today on the show, our first show, our inaugural show, we're going to talk about what I call cumulative workplace distress. We're going to name it, we're going to call it out, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to change it collectively together. So welcome into the show. I'm Dr. Danielle Lord. I'm the hostess of the show, and I'm super excited to be back. It's been a year, and back with a new show with much appreciation to our executive producer and founder, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. So excited to be back on USA Global TV and Radio. All right. So as I said, if you're feeling that tension, that stress when you walk into any environment, particularly at work, it's probably because people are hurt, and it shouldn't hurt to go to work. And people are tired. People are frustrated. People are experiencing pain in so many different ways. And we're going to talk about that today and unpack it all. So a brief introduction to me. My name, again, it's Dr. Danielle Lord. I have a PhD in leadership theory, and I spent 30 years in the corporate sector helping to make organizations happier places. And as a business owner today and founder of Archetype Learning Solutions, that's exactly what I do, is I help organizations create healthier cultures so we can have happier employees. And when we have happier employees, we bring that happiness into the home where we have happier family life. And we bring that happiness into the community so we can have happier, healthier communities. So that's everything that I do, because it shouldn't hurt to go to work. Thank you, Dr. Jacqueline, our producer. Popped up my book there, my latest book, Engaging Your Employees, 12 Heart-Centered Strategies. Every strategy that's in the book is completely free. And I think that that's something that makes the book different, is that it doesn't take money. It doesn't take a whole lot of resources to make folks unhappy, or to make folks unhappy, to make them happy. It's simple connection through engagement, through quality daily interactions. So we're going to talk about what I call cumulative workplace distress, because that is the title of today's show. And that term emerged last year, late 2024, when I was engaged with some friends, two physicians, and we were doing continued research into physician leadership fatigue. And it was, which one do we pick? Burnout, PTSD, compassion fatigue, moral injury? Which one of these do we pick to summarize and create a container to talk about all these things? And so we came up with the term cumulative workplace distress. And what I like about the title, or the term cumulative workplace distress, as an umbrella term that describes all of those things, including role stress and surface acting that we have added to that definition, is that it identifies the system as the problem. And that system is the organization that we're working in. Years and years of broken ideas, flawed mental models, outdated approaches to how we work, rather than making burnout about the employee. So every time we point the finger at an employee and say, well, you're just burned out, or you're just having a bad day, or you're just experiencing compassion fatigue, we make it about the employee. We point the finger at them and we say, you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not resilient enough, rather than holding up the mirror, pointing the finger back at ourselves and asking the tough question, are we as leaders the ones that are creating the container and the space for all of this unhappiness to exist? And I would say, yes, based on my 34 years of doing this work, that's exactly where the problem is stemming from. And to make matters worse, as we were going through the research data with the physicians that we had in our latest study of understanding physician leadership fatigue, what stood out was the hubris among the executive leaders. It was almost as though they were flippant in how they responded to the pain. They didn't care. They laughed at people. They mocked individuals. And that, to me, signifies that there is a really deep problem and challenge within our organizations. And all of that is creating the pain, the frustration, the stress, the distress, the trauma that we're experiencing in the workplace. And I have talked about, and I continue to talk about, level 2 trauma. Level 2 trauma is different than what we normally associate with trauma or a traumatic event, an experience of building collapse, a fire, an accident, industrial accident. Level 2 trauma is the pervasive interpersonal, mental and emotional attacks that we feel sometimes on a daily basis in organizations. I think the biggest hoodwink we've ever collectively experienced is this idea of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never harm me. I think we've all known for a long time that that's not necessarily the case. The words, the personal attacks can be very, very damaging to us. And I think many of us, that's what we're experiencing right now. So with that, I am very excited today. I don't have a guest on this first show, but I am super excited to bring on Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, who's the executive producer, into the conversation, because I think, Dr. Jacqueline, with your experience as the listening mentor and your show of Elevated Listening, you're the perfect person to have as part of this conversation, because I think a lot of this hurt and this pain and this cumulative workplace distress that most people are experiencing is the simple fact that we are not heard. We are not listened to. And listening is so much more than just words. It shows up in our body language. It shows up in changes in our personality. They call that the shadow side. It shows up in how we show up at work. One day we're happy, the next day we're not. So listening is much bigger than just the words. But what's your experience been with that? And how would you respond to that, Dr. Jacqueline?
Thank you so much, Dr. Danielle, for having me here today. It's an honor, especially to be on your first episode. It's actually thrilling. So what I think about what you said is it's spot on. Many times I will have people tell me that they feel invisible in their life, in their work. They don't feel seen. They don't feel heard. They will go to their supervisor, their manager, leadership. They'll come with an idea, or maybe they'll share an experience. And the answer is always the same. That's not in your area. Why are you bringing this to me? Or we don't have time for this, or get back to what it is you're supposed to be doing. Or maybe they actually listen and nothing happens as a result of it. And so it starts to build up. And we talk about the cumulative effect. It builds up higher and higher. What happens is we put up a bigger and deeper wall. And now we are protecting ourselves behind this wall because we feel like no one's listening. And what I'd like to share, and I'd love to have your input on this, is I feel like, first of all, we have to respect ourselves, and we have to say, you know what, I matter. I'm important. And so I'm not going to tolerate being disrespected. I think it starts there. What do you think?
I completely agree. And I would add to that, after years and years and years of experiencing this, though, the exact things that you have talked about, how does that erode our own ability to have self-respect? If we have had that taken away, stripped away from us daily, bit by bit, it's almost like, death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's just one more small micro injury after another. And how can we, when we exist in that state of trauma, that state of stress, that emotional hijack, how can we have enough self-respect to stand up for ourselves, especially when we know we have lots of bills, and that fear of, boy, if I stand up and say something, am I going to be on the chopping block next? But it absolutely starts there, 100%. I think it's just that slow erosion over time that eats away the ability to have the confidence to say that. And that's, again, that hubris that I was referring to with the research that we did, where it's just like, we don't care. Humans, employees have just become expendable. It feels like, maybe they always have been. Maybe we're just experiencing it more now.
Well, I think one of the things that comes to light for me is, in my experience since the last year, is I have been interviewing people, and what comes up over and over again is about the money. It's capitalism. It's about the bottom line. And so when it's always about the bottom line, it's not about the people. And we have to say to ourselves, okay, what is our role and what is our legacy that we're going to leave? So when we observe this type of behavior, do we raise our hand? Do we do anything about it? And when it's happening to us, what I will say to people is, as hard as it sounds, find a way to separate the emotion and find a solution. And the solution may be, this is not the place for me. Let me start to develop a plan. Doesn't mean you have to share it with everyone, go to your superior, but start to put a plan in place so that you can leave. Or you can choose to stay and call it out for what it is, and then see what happens from there. That the old whistleblowing, so to speak, and then that might not be a pleasant road. But that's what I found is, how can we separate the emotion and look for a solution?
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you mentioned solutions, because I hope as we have conversations throughout the hopefully years of having this conversation around it shouldn't hurt to go to work, we not only can share stories so that people can begin to create a space or a container for empathy, but we can also say, what are some solutions? And I like the solution that you put forward is, what's a plan? And, interestingly enough, from the research that we did last year, that was one of the questions that a lot of physicians were asking is, what's my exit strategy around this? And I think that is an indicator that, again, the system, the organizations are very broken when we have everyone running around saying, what's my plan to get out of here? And I heard the same things, Dr. Jacqueline, sitting around the table with executives, going through the engagement reports, the oftentimes Gallup, or there's lots of other engagement surveys that organizations use to measure the discretionary effort, is how we define engagement. And they would look at the comments and they would literally pick things out, and they would say, oh, I just want to feel respected at work. I want to be heard. I want to be valued. Written comments that were given in good faith by employees, only to have the executive leadership team sit around the table and mock them. It was horrifyingly sad to be at that table and then walk out of the room from them and think, how can I trust them? How can I trust them when I know this is what they're saying about their employees? And then going back out into the hallways of the organization and, giving someone a high five. It was horrifying to me. And it's a real problem. It's a real challenge. I don't know what to do about that. I think that's going to take a larger collective conversation to say, how do we fix this? How do we right this ship? But I think you're right. I think it all comes back to the bottom line of maybe the money that they're making, the money they're bringing in personally and not wanting to lose that, the money that the organization is bringing in. But it's a very big problem.
And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I was feeling uncomfortable as you were talking about it because you're witness to something and you can't unhear or unsee what you now know. And it's kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do with that information? I was sharing some information about a mine, MINE, that had collapsed and a number of people who had been killed and the impact on their families and the community. And the person I was speaking to said, well, it's a good thing that you're not the CEO of that company. And I said, what do you mean by that? And the person said, no one cares about those lives. It's the fact that the mine is closed and that the company is not able to. And I thought, what?
Wow.
What? That is shocking to me. And I said, well, I'm a peace ambassador and a humanitarian. And the person said, well, make sure you don't ever go into corporate because you wouldn't make it. And that really had a profound effect on me because how do we go from we're watching the stock market, right, which relates to real companies where real people work. And the bottom line is about how the stock's performing so people's portfolios can get thicker or not. To the people who are running the business, the people on the front line who are the brand ambassadors of the business and how they feel and how they're being treated.
Yeah, it's rough. And what are the solutions? Aside from saying, this is what I say, we've got to start calling this out. We've got to name it something bigger than just pointing the finger back at the employee and saying, well, it's a you problem. And in fact, at the same hospital where I worked at the time, I was having a conversation with the CEO, and I remember him saying very explicitly, if our team members are burnt out, it's on them, not me. Right back to the same thing that you were hearing and some of the same things that you reported on. And then we wonder why there's so much pain in our communities and our families and our organizations. But it's definitely a challenge. I think one thing, as I think about it from being a political science major, there is a hypothesis in political science and sociology that is called the J curve. And the J curve postulates that at some point, everyone will become so collectively frustrated and with the changing expectations that there will be a collective movement. And that's what I hope will happen at some point within our organizations. We can't spend this much time in pain and frustration. So again, hopefully we'll be able to take back some agency at some point when enough employees say we've had enough, because it shouldn't hurt to go to work. While we're talking about engagement, I want to share some of the engagement scores from the 2026 Gallup Global Workforce Survey. Lowest scores since 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020, but only 20% of the global workforce is currently engaged. So that means that only 2 out of 10 employees are actively committed to your organization. And if you're that concerned about the bottom line as a business owner, this should concern you. And we can do both. These two things do not have to be mutually exclusive, but for many years, that's exactly how we've treated them. I think an even worse statistic, tough to say those two things together, 49% of the global workforce says that they are struggling or even suffering. That is 49%. Let's just round it up. What's 1 percentage point? 50% of our employees worldwide struggling or suffering. In the United States and Canada, employees report daily that they are stressed, angry, sad, and lonely. And that number ranges from 20 to 50% as well. So there are clearly some challenges within our organizations and our corporate sector. Dr. Jacqueline, I'll invite you back into the conversation as a listening mentor and humanitarian and peace ambassador. What struck you about those numbers?
I have a background in employee engagement. I sold loyalty programs for years. And so I'd like to say I'm shocked by the information, but I'm actually not, because in interviewing as many interviews as we do, people are typically so distraught, they end up, I hate to say this, taking their lives, or they leave corporate and start something on their own. So people can go, multiple ways. but those numbers are alarming.
Very much. I agree. And fun, you mentioned we were talking about, taking back our own agency. What do we do? What's our exit strategy? Going into business is certainly one of them. And I think 5 years now on my own, there's no way I could go back into the corporate sector, just knowing what I know, even, 6 months into it. And I remember, because I had been laid off, that's how I ended up starting my own business, starting Archetype. And I was still actively looking, even though I had kind of hung my own shingle. And even at that point, 6 months in, thinking, oh, do I want to go back into this? And even then, I was really on the fence and actively looking, actively interviewing, but definitely drew a fine, firm line. I remember one interview I had, it was a position I was very well qualified for. Great interview, great conversation. And at the end of the interview, she said, well, we have 5 minutes left. Sell yourself. And I ended the interview. I said, I'm not a circus pony. So I guess that's the end of the interview. I wasn't going to just kind of prostitute myself like that. That's how it felt. It felt so dehumanizing to say, well, sell yourself. It's like, we just had an hour conversation and I didn't sell myself based on everything that we just talked about. So I can't imagine going back into the corporate sector at this point and realizing the pain that individuals are feeling.
I'm sorry that you experienced that, but that was a definite answer. Goodbye. See you later. Yeah. And I'm also celebrating 5 years as a business owner. It goes by so quickly, doesn't it?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel like big chunks of time are missing. It's a good thing. It's a very good thing.
It is
very busy, but I often get asked a lot, how did we get to this place, where employees are feeling and seen as expendable? And I'll do a little bit of history. I was a history major, so I've always got to bring in a little history to the conversation. But I want to start by repeating a statement that an executive made to me about a year ago. When I asked if he was worried or concerned about retention, and he looked at me and he said, I still have money on my recruiting line item. He was referring to his budget. Why would I be concerned about retention? Why should I be concerned about retention when I still have money in my recruiting line item? That is kind of the prevailing thought. So if you ever wondered if you were expendable, clearly a lot of business owners and executives think you are. And it makes me wonder, they all have this kind of suit of armor that they put on, or this air about them that says, I'm an executive now. And so I'm in this special all-knowing category of what makes business run. I think that's a really questionable place to be when you cannot see the connection to losing employees, even those that stay, what we call now quiet quitting. And I don't like that term, but that might be a conversation for another day. If you can't make that connection, I have to really question how business savvy you really are. But with that, let's get into a little bit of some history around how did we become so expendable. And I talk about this. I write a lot about workplace trauma. So I've got some papers that I've recently compiled and put together that I'd love to be able to share. You can find that on my website if you're curious. But let's talk a little bit about 1,000-year-old history that is a part of who we are. We know, we're beginning to realize that some collective pieces of us kind of stay within our DNA through trauma. And a lot of that messaging gets encoded and passed down through our DNA. So let's look back at 1,000 years ago, where we had the first organization, as I call it. This is all in my humble opinion here, but the first organizations were the feudal manor. And on the feudal manor, you had 3 classes of people. You had the family of the feudal lord. You had those that oversaw the work, which was generally some type of knights or those that were more in service to the manor. And then you had the rest of the individuals who were the serfs. The serfs were often given a small plot of land. They had a small house. excuse me, and they worked the land and they worked for the manorial lord, oftentimes grueling days, long days. Everyone in the family worked for the sustainability and the support of the manor. So while some of the serfs may have broken some laws, broken some rules, the manorial lord was usually reticent to evict an entire family, because they knew that evicting an entire family could have negative impacts on how the manor sustained and functioned. So that's kind of our first initial experience with folks in the workplace, but at least they knew that if we eject or evict an entire family, that's going to have some operational consequences. It wasn't really until the industrial age, about the 1880s, 1890s, when we started to see the increase in the steam production and mechanized equipment that was starting to come into the industry, where it really sped up the production value. And I think that's when we really started to see employees become expendable, because there was always somebody to fill the role if somebody wasn't able to perform the work at the standard that was expected of them. So with that, we saw the introduction of Taylorism from Frederick Taylor. He was an efficiency expert. His belief was that every task an employee does can be managed and documented down to the second. And we saw that work come into play about the same time, where every single task was documented, every employee was measured as to how efficient they were. That was proven to be very ineffective in organizations. And what we learned from that was that people revolted. So people have stood up in the past and said, we are not going to be treated this way. And Taylorism gave us some good things that came out of it. But at the end of the day, employees said, no, we're not doing this. We're not going to be treated like this. We saw the introduction of scientific management, which again is very task-oriented, very productivity-oriented. It is unfortunately what most of the consulting firms base their work on, is the scientific management approach. So if you've ever worked with a big consulting firm, Booz Allen, McKinsey, Deloitte, they're all using scientific management approach, which is all about the task. There's no relationship in there. There's no connection in there. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of today, is that lack of connection through the use of productivity and tasks. And because if the consulting firms are suggesting it and businesses are making a lot of money using their approach, why wouldn't that be the right way to go? So I think we're seeing a lot of that pain that's coming out of that approach of make it all about the productivity. And followed with that, we've had 40 years of downsizing and right-sizing and flattening the organization. So we've had additional pain that's come with that, where we've seen employees become product of a RIF, reduction in force. We've seen large swaths of the organization just completely eradicated, all in the name, again, of what Dr. Jacqueline mentioned, the bottom line and the profit sector. And that's been a lot of pain that's been involved with that, a lot of survivor guilt. There's trauma again, there's more work. Usually there's not another person that's brought in to do the work. And so the individuals are left with, now I have to take on more and more tasks, and there's a greater expectation. And if I don't, am I going to be on the chopping block next? So we really have had a long, long time, a long history of this is how organizations run. But what if we shifted that mindset to, what if our organizations were based on relationships and human connections and trust, and the happiness that's generated from the real human deep connections that we get? How much more productive and effective would we be if we based our entire new paradigm on that model? So with that little history lesson there, I've always got to get my history in. I'll ask Dr. Jacqueline, what anything that stood out there in that kind of history of our organizations based on your world and where you work in the corporate sector and as an elevated listener?
Well, thank you for the question. I want to go back to something that you said earlier about money in the pocket and the fact that retention isn't important. And I used to know the number. I don't have it today, but how much money it actually costs to onboard someone.
Mm-hmm.
And then thinking of the person as having a shelf life, they're not even a human. Well,
Yeah.
we can
Oh,
replace
wow.
them.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can replace them. And the interesting thing is, Dr. Danielle, I know at 63, when I was coming up through corporate in my career, it was kind of like it was a cradle to grave with AT&T. I thought I'd stay there forever. And with the younger generations, it's almost like, well, I'll be there for 2 years because I'm never going to go anywhere. I'll get the money and then I'll run. So I think with the history lesson, it's about acknowledging what's happened. And then to your point, looking at, well, what works and what doesn't work. And one thing that has always worked since the beginning of time is building relationships.
Yes.
And the relationships are what matters. And when you have the relationships, other things will come. But if you have an organization of people who are literally scared, suffering from anxiety, depression, just punching a clock, can barely function. I had the opportunity to overhear a conversation, which you don't like to, but 3 women who were in their late 30s who are all on 3 different kinds of drugs for ADHD, anxiety, depression. And I happened to say, I inserted myself in the conversation, and I said how sorry I was to actually happen to overhear this. But what was the main issue? Do they know what is the cause of what's going on? And one of the people said, I am terrified to lose my job. And so I just will take medication so I don't have to feel, and I'm just like a zombie.
Yeah. Isn't that horrifying? That's pain at work.
That's it right there.
Pain at work. Wow. How incredibly sad. Yeah. And then how does that trickle into home life and community and all those other places that we mentioned earlier? Wow. How unfortunate. And yet that's 3 people. How many other people out there are in this same place of suffering? Yeah.
That's right. That's it. And there are 3 people who were at a fitness community, by the way, working out. So they're taking care of their health. And the one happened to mention that the medication the person's on isn't working and they need something stronger. So what I want people to think about is you have to get to the root cause. You can have a Band-Aid and you can put a Band-Aid on something. You can take a pill, you can numb yourself. But the issue at hand is what has to be addressed. So Dr. Danielle, I think one of the important points is, let's say you are unhappy. You're aware of it. You know exactly what the reason is. And at the same time, you've got mouths to feed. Maybe you have a new child at home. Maybe you're the only one who's earning an income. What do? You can't just say, you know what, I'm out. So you come up with a plan, but maybe the plan is a 6, it's a 9 month, it's a year. What do you do in the interim?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that that's what I love about the strategies in my book, Engaging Your Employees, is because it doesn't require a manager to make you happy. It requires, or I shouldn't say it requires, it encourages everyone to get involved in creating happiness and creating a healthy culture. So if there's one thing I would say that anyone can do today is utilize the daily dose. And the daily dose is a combination of neurochemicals that create a sense of happiness and well-being within our self. And the daily dose stands for dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So any way that we can find to celebrate small wins, even as small as they are, put together a project timeline. And every time you hit a milestone within that project, celebrate it, even if it's a year out. Find ways to recognize each other, thank each other, support each other. And actually, whenever you do that, you're getting serotonin and endorphins as well. So it's a reciprocal engagement activity, and anyone can do it. It doesn't require your manager. to do this. So that's what I would suggest, is find ways to increase the dopamine. And it's not doing this, scrolling on your cell phone. That's a short-term dopamine. And what we want is longer-term, longer sustaining dopamine. So looking at a larger goal for yourself, and then accomplishing and celebrating those milestones when you accomplishing, and then really having something to accomplish or to celebrate once you hit that goal. Good dopamine, long-term sustained dopamine can last weeks, even months. So find those things to celebrate, and celebrate them with each other and encourage each other, because again, you might not be getting this from your management, from your executive folks. So we've got to support each other in this. And that does not happen through a chemical. That's oxycodone, and we want oxytocin, not oxycodone. So that would be my suggestion. I've got other strategies in the books. And in fact, I have a sequel to the book coming out, hopefully this year, which is, I don't have the title in front of me, Building Beyond Engagement, I think is the working title right now. And that's going to be a book for leaders to say, how do we move past this? How do we call this out? It is cumulative workplace distress. We're going to name it, we're going to call it out, and we're all going to collectively shift this. So that would be my suggestion. And I think we are at about time. And so I want to make sure I can introduce my guest next month. Our show will be July 3rd. And my guest is Glenda Benavides. And we're going to be talking about reclaiming it, soul on fire. So I want to thank Dr. Jacqueline for being a great partner in the conversation today. And thank everyone for watching. And we'll see you next month with Glenda Benavides. Until then, name it, change it, take control of it, give yourself and others the daily dose. Thanks. See you soon.
How much of your value have you been giving? How much of your value have you been giving away? Saying yes when the answer should have been no, lowering your price to secure the opportunity, giving more while receiving less. Over time, it adds up. Until one moment brings clarity, you've been giving away your value. This is not about working harder. This is not about doing more. It's about boundaries. It's about pricing. It's about respect. From Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck comes a direct and necessary message. Stop over-delivering. Stop underpricing your expertise. Stop negotiating against yourself. Because when you recognize your value, everything changes. Stop giving away your value. Boundaries, pricing, and the business of respect. Available now wherever fine books are sold and on Amazon. A film by USA Global TV and Radio. Executive producer Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Videographer and cinematic production Paul Garcia. Voiceover by Ed Wargas. Stop giving it away. Start owning it.
People are searching for experts every day. Are they finding you, or are they finding someone else? Every day, professionals are building authority through media. We've already built the platform. USA Global TV and Radio. Over 14,000 shows streamed to over 60 countries. This isn't about becoming famous. It's about leverage, visibility, credibility, opportunity. One interview, one conversation, one show, repurposed into content, connection, and business growth. Most people assume hosting a TV show requires a studio, a production team, and a massive budget. Our television packages begin at $1,500 US per month. Professional production, global distribution, replay visibility, built for voices with something to say. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, and if this resonates with you, we should talk. USA Global TV and Radio, all rights reserved. Contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com.
Thanks Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.